the Protagonist Show, episode 13.
Lucky number.
I was going to say lucky number. Some people think it's unlucky. Come on, we're here.
That was my number.
Unlucky. Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Well, there you go. I was number 25. I don't think that's all that lucky or unlucky for me. But welcome to the show. It's the Protagonist Show, where we talk about three big topics and other things going on in the world of soccer. I'm Dan Vaughn, editor of Protagonist Soccer, joined by the assistant editor and sort of the catch-all everything else, Mr. Joshua Duder. Welcome to the show, Josh. How you doing, bud?
I'm good. It looks like I'm in reverse world. All the text on my screen is reversed.
I don't control that. I'm sorry for you. If it is,
it's fine. Maybe I'll just make sure I don't talk backwards like Mixelblick, and we'll be okay.
That's a reference that I doubt few people would understand, but I got you, buddy. Excellent. Well, let's dig right into this, not keep the people waiting. Detroit City today unveils its new stadium lane along with some, I said name, not lane. Its name along with some renderings of the stadium. It looks fantastic. They're calling it the forever home of Detroit City Football Club. And the new name is Alumni 5 Field.
Great.
So I dug into that to see who Alumni was. I wasn't 100% sure. They're apparently a banking app, if that's your thing. Doesn't have quite the ring of Keyworth Stadium, does it?
No.
And I feel like I'm not a big fan of corporate names on stadiums. Corporations come and go. We've seen so many names appear and then disappear as, the industries change. And, particularly when you get into tech changes quickly. So you might see a name change quickly. And I hate that. I love the sort of I love Camden Yards being Camden Yards and Fenway Park being Fenway Park. And I know I had two baseball reference, but I like Old Trafford being Old Trafford. I like a stadium having its name and not based off someone else's name or another corporation. So I'm resistant. However, we live in the real world, and getting sponsorship money for a name is a big deal. I just wonder if Detroit Football Club isn't the right fit for this, and how this looks and how it affects the future going forward. That's how I read it when it came out. I guess I'm curious, how'd you see it?
I mean, I'm a soccer romantic. You know this about me. I love when we talk about the old stadiums and the names that they when they were built and how they're cathedrals to the sport. And Keyworth is doesn't fall short of that. Is this too corporate for the supporters? I know that they can be outspoken when things don't align with the hills that they like to stand on. I don't know, die on for some of them, but some of them definitely stand firm on their morals, and I really respect that. Is moving to a big stadium with a corporate name on it a little bit too much for some of them? Or do you think they'll also recognize, Dan, this is the real world, and it's adjust, take the money, grow the club, or die?
So I when you put that, I thought the same thing, right? Just given the sort of the passion of those supporters, the history of being opposed to corporate soccer in a lot of ways, and the statement from their Twitter account, cool looking renderings, on track to be the best looking stadium in USL.
Fair.
Carrying water? I don't know.
Listen, they love their club.
100%. And I think there's the problem is particularly for some of those supporters is that, like we said, they are issue-driven voters. They have a strong opinion about the way things should be done, what's right and what's wrong. And while it is clear that Sean Mann and the rest of that leadership team at Detroit City has done a lot to preserve Detroit City as a football team and continuing to be impactful, going from an amateur side up through the ranks and now playing in, Division II soccer and USL Championship, that was not done easily. It was something that they took personal and invested in it and tried to make this thing happen. And there have been times when they've clashed with NGS about some of these moves. Doesn't appear that the stadium is on that list as of yet, We shall see. Renderings look pretty cool. I guess, does not having a specific name, like say Keyworth or like some of the ones that we were talking about, does that negate any of the prettiness of their shiny new toy that's coming up?
No, I think it's difficult to say how impactful it will be for the culture of soccer and soccer hipsters outside of Detroit. I mean, we take a look at some of the new stadium that is proposed. I don't know when they'll start to break ground on it, but in Sacramento, they're doing it on the rail yards, and I think it's going to have a name something like the rail yards, right? Something along that line. So integrating maybe where the building was being built would be cool. I think also, and you've seen this in the Bundesliga a little bit, where the stadiums can be 100 years old, and they'll have that name listed. This is the original name of the stadium, and so it'll be like corporate name field at original name stadium. So
Right.
there's something like, there's still a little bit of wiggle room in here to preserve some of that that soccer history and that culture in Detroit, and you'll see that in some of these new stadiums if these ownerships are savvy.
Yeah, I think that personally, from my perspective, is a better approach.
Yeah.
It gives a nod to the history and the connection to the past, and it also allows the opportunity to leverage an investor's money, or excuse me, an advertiser's money into the club. I wonder if that makes it less appealing as a buy, though. If you don't get the full naming, does that sort of hold you back if you're someone spending money? I don't know. I do know that. Let me try this again. Alumni Phi Field doesn't roll off the lips like you might hope it would. I know that Alumni Phi.
You'll get there.
I'll get there eventually. They were a shirt sponsor I think last year.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a business that has been around Detroit City and has played a part in their rise, in the sense of investing advertising dollars. I don't know. I think that if I'm a Detroit City fan, for all the charm that an old field can have, there's plenty to be excited about: new bathrooms and better vendors and better seating and all of the things that come along with a new stadium. The question is, how long does that last? How long does that shine last?
Forever, apparently.
That's right. It's forever home. And how quickly does it, when things go wrong, you get your first 5 or 6 game losing streak, and it's not the way that it used to be at Keyworth. This is a different, team. This is a different club. I'm not as connected to it, because how much is Keyworth part of the Detroit City magic? I don't know. I think that it's an interesting, part of the lore, at least for those of us that don't live in Detroit proper, or Hamtramck. I think that we maybe don't have the same connection or the lived experience, and the romance can be something that we manufacture from a distance.
It's
now,
possible.
The club the club can leverage that, right? I'm not saying that the club is, but the reality of it may not be quite as romantic as it is from afar.
I know that definitely you and I have a visit to Hamtramck on our bucket list as soccer supporters, lovers of the sport, and visiting cities and fan groups it would be super cool to take a trip up to Detroit City and watch a game in that stadium before we can't. I think one of the ways that they can transition to their new digs, Dan, is maybe take some of the accoutrement from Keyworth and install it in their new Alumni Phi stadium. Whether it's taking the seats or the benches from the supporter section where the NGS stand and make a lot of racket, and sort of installing that in a spot where it's always home, it's literally always with them, and their heart and soul is still there. Or if it's taking some of those container boxes that they use around the pitch, maybe if they install those at the far end of the new site, where you could set up a club shop and a soccer museum or something. I don't know the dimensions of the space that they're working with for the new field, but those are some ideas that you can incorporate the old field into the new and give it that historic feel.
I think that there's always been a tension between the leadership of the club that are trying to push things forward and some of the more ardent supporters. there is a more, when you talk to the people from the front office, while they are thankful for the support and see it as a critical part of the team's success, they're also oftentimes trying to put a little distance between some of the positions being taken by their supporters versus maybe what the corporate sort of, corporate speak that might want to come out of the front office is. And I think that that's something that probably all soccer clubs deal with, particularly because the politics of soccer supporter groups and the opinions of fans can be very, very strong. And I'll actually get to that when we go off topic. But it is interesting to see this club grow into one of the big names in American soccer outside of MLS. And you got to argue even within MLS.
I think it's bigger than some of the teams in Major League
yeah.
Soccer.
So I think that it's been interesting to watch that growth as they've developed beyond being just a neighborhood club to being a full-on professional team and what they're doing there in Detroit. And now building a soccer-specific stadium in Detroit, I mean, maybe the first big investment since, I don't know. I transparently, I know that Detroit has gone through hard times and there's not a lot of people lining up to drop money in that market. So kind of exciting, I think if you're a citizen of Detroit, even if you're like sort of a passive supporter, this might be the kind of thing to get you to move in and get involved and invested. It's a 15,000 seat stadium, which I think is a great size. I think it's perfect. Yeah, I think you can get sellouts. I think that even on low turnout days, it's still going to be loud. And those fans the fans at Keyworth show up 8,000, 10,000 strong pretty consistently. A new stadium, I think, adds the potential of bringing in maybe some of those fans who've familiar with Detroit, but maybe haven't been out for a game and now have a reason to visit beyond just what's going on in the field and have a team they can be proud of in Detroit.
Yeah, and I think that some of that push and pull between the club and the supporters is what has allowed them to grow in meaningful ways and has allowed them to come to this point where it didn't come too soon and it became a financial burden or an albatross for them. This is the perfect time for this club to move into this perfect size stadium. And Detroit City is actually a case study in how to grow a soccer team in the United States on a shoestring budget. And I think not only are they they have fewer seats in their stadium, but that thing will never not be packed. I mean, I think even in a losing streak, maybe they'll lose a few, casuals, but I think that it'll still be a very, very busy stadium, and MLS teams would do well. USL championship teams would do well to study how Detroit City has risen to the point that they're at and try to emulate parts of their growth.
Yeah, I think the careful planning and sort of the always making decisions that benefit the future of the club rather than the moment, I think is a big deal. And it's been what's paid off for them. And topic 2, let's talk about a club that's making this similar kind of move, and that's Vermont Green. We talked a little bit about them last week when they won the USL League 2 championship after an undefeated season. I think their third successful year making the playoffs, but also generating massive crowds, and the final was no exception. Drew at least 5,000 fans. Some say as high as 7. I think that it kind of depends on how you count it. There was so many fans that showed up. They were outside looking through chain link fences. I know that I spoke to their head coach, Chris Taylor, and he was saying that they actually reached out to a construction company that was doing some construction next door and asked if they could clear that field and have the fans sit there. And the construction company supported that, which I think is funny. So often that we get these very toxic relationships between soccer clubs and other entities, but in Vermont, not so much, and cleared all their equipment and all the construction so that fans could bring lawn chairs and sit out there. So great success. And as you might expect, that great success brought plenty of interest from media outlets who don't typically cover lower league soccer. I've seen lots of interviews with David Goss. David Goss is a lifetime MLS guy, and I'll be transparent. I'm not super familiar with his career. I guess I got involved with David Goss in MLS. That's where I'm familiar with him. And he called the USL League Two championship in Vermont. Did a great job. I had no problem with this call. I tend to like him. I don't follow the leagues that he covers, and so I don't tend to engage with a lot of his content. But he is, because he called the game, and he is the bridge between established journalists and this game, this match, and this club. He was the person that I saw most being interviewed about that. I saw Peter Wilt make some appearances. I don't know what he has to do with Vermont Green, but he is a guy that has built a club or two, including another darling of that level, Forward Madison. And I guess for me, I was frustrated. And I know I got to be careful at this because we've often been critical of gatekeepers and purity tests when it comes to really everything in soccer. I tend to be critical of those things, but I find it frustrating that every time there is a success story, the moment is what we get, and then it quickly goes back into the status quo. This also happens in the U.S. Open Cup. You see this all the time, where teammates El Federalito is suddenly on the lips of people who have never heard of El Federalito, and they're all laughing at, they're the Burrito Club. And again, good for El Federalito to get that coverage, but it's frustrating that the media sees little or no value in the day-to-day operations of lower league soccer, and instead will dip in when it's convenient for them. I think, as we were talking about Detroit City earlier, Detroit City managed to win hearts and minds by sort of being continuously competitive. And that's something that is incredibly hard to sustain for any club, but particularly clubs of amateur size or clubs in NISA for that matter, that it is a challenge to be relevant and interesting and playing well in big matches. Oftentimes, clubs don't do that. They go through slumps. They go through streaks whenever they're not going to do well. They have injuries. There's a host of reasons why. And if the media coverage only dips in when something big happens, it's just frustrating for me. It's not that I want a table full of competitors. I don't want that. I don't want David Goss covering amateur soccer scene. Damn it. I don't want that. But I just want media types to sort of lock in a bit. And that doesn't seem like that high of a bar for me to expect of them, to have some awareness of not a pyramid, because it's not a pyramid, but the different levels of soccer and the players within that matter. I am aware of who is competitive in MLS. I don't think it's too much to ask that they might have an idea of who is competitive in USL League 2 or other leagues, USL League 1 or the NPSL or the League for Clubs. Asking that question of someone that covers soccer even more than us for a living, they get to do this for a living, they can't be bothered to do that. I guess my question, I think a place to start is, from a Vermont perspective, Vermont Green perspective, they've obviously leveraged this. They're probably going to sell a host of jerseys. Good for them. They're probably going to sell out on tickets for next season. That was probably going to happen regardless of what media coverage they got. But do they have the juice to keep the spotlight? Can they reproduce the run? Can they come back and do this again? Because, we know people involved in that organization, particularly Patrick Inferna, who used to be one of us. And he talks a lot about the idea of being sustainable and growing smartly, just like Detroit City did. And while he has poo-pooed the idea of going professional, at least at this point in their development, it's not impossible to imagine that. We just finished year 3, and they've already won a national championship. By the way, something Detroit City didn't manage to do until they were in NISA. So I'm curious, can Vermont repeat this? Can they rebuild and come back for another season?
Yeah, this is a really difficult level to do that at, no matter how big this year was for them. If you take a look at Ballard FC, who is another team that I really respect, I think they've done a lot of things right. We get to this time of the year and we often wonder, what teams in what teams at this level can make it to the next level. Ballard is always on the tip of my tongue for sure. We take a look at like One Knox, who started off the same year as Vermont Green in Knoxville, Tennessee, and moved up to League One. They've been competitive in League One. They've had growth. They've moved fields. So there's definitely an opportunity for Vermont to grow. I don't think that they're going to drop off, but I think that this league is incredibly difficult to maintain a constant high level, a high standard. If you look at teams like Des Moines Menace, they're always in the national spotlight when it gets to the postseason, when it gets to the U.S. Open Cup opening rounds. We always hear about Des Moines Menace. They're in the exact same league. Long Island Rough Riders, maybe a little bit less notoriety around that organization. But if you Wikipedia Long Island Rough Riders, you look at the long list of names of players and coaches that have come through there, and that is the name of their game, is just developing players and coaches who those players and coaches move on to the next level where the club sort of stays where it's at. Can Vermont Green do it again? Absolutely. It can be done again, but it will be difficult for them to accomplish that. And again, we go back to what I saw with Ballard, who did make it to that playoff or to that national final. They won the national final in 2023. Right. And so, yes, they can maintain that high standard. They've won the Pacific Northwest 3 times. Sometimes you get to the end and you lose to a bigger fish. There's always a bigger fish. And this year, Vermont Green were amazing. They look good, they play good, and they feel good about themselves. And I think that they're going to be fantastic going into next season.
I hear that. I mean, complaining about the way in which media operates, particularly sports media in this country, is kind of a waste of breath because it's going to continue. It's always been that way. And I don't know that it's going to change. There's not big money in covering lower league soccer, and therefore the big money doesn't follow it. And so if your job is covering soccer, and you're never going to be asked the question about who's winning the NPSL or fill in the blank league, then it kind of doesn't matter. So why would you spend the time on that?
Right. We get limited opportunities, right, for the teams that we love to cover, for them to shine on the national spotlight. So as critical as I can be of some of those bigger outlets like ESPN, like Sports Illustrated, that they don't cover these teams more regularly, how often do they come across their desk when the bulk of what they get paid to report on are the big teams? So I wish that the little teams would get a little bit more oxygen, but on the other hand, it makes sense why they don't, and that's why we exist.
Yes, we exist. Very true. I will also think part of me is, how can USL League 2 leverage the kind of, hotness of the current, Vermont Green right now? How do you leverage that to draw more eyes to your league, to draw more interest? Obviously, that question's for smarter people than I, and the challenge of a 9-month off season is such a bruiser for amateur soccer in this country to try to maintain interest. It's just.
Do you know what starts in like 3 weeks?
Well, I know the Super League starts in 3 weeks. It starts in 2 weeks.
Yeah. The 2026 U.S. Open Cup qualifying rounds start in just a few weeks. And I know we haven't even gotten to the final of the 2025 Open Cup yet. So, it's a long off season, but some of these teams that maybe they run a squad in UPSL in the fall season, as we mentioned last pod, sometimes you have teams that they pull together special squads just for Open Cup qualifying. Some of those players duck indoors. So yes, it's a long season for teams like Vermont Green, but I think you'll see some of these other teams that we like to follow at that level. They'll play peekaboo with us. We'll see them on YouTube streams. We'll get to watch those Open Cup qualifiers. So there's lots of soccer in the offing.
I hear you. Let's dig into topic 3 and close this sucker out.
You got it. So Dan, there is an absolute metric ton of soccer documentaries. I know that in the dark days of me being an MLS fan and not knowing even at all about the lower leagues, I would dip into Netflix and see what I could find and watch documentaries about teams in far-flung places that I had never heard of before. Dan, there's a whole new documentary coming out. It's a Welcome to Wrexham spinoff. Now listen, I enjoyed Welcome to Wrexham. I've watched the first few seasons. I'm halfway through the season that dropped in May, and it's slowing down. I was a big fan. It's a bit much. And now we're going to get a spinoff. There's a team in Necaxa, part of Liga MX, so a top division team. That, and, you know, I have some curious questions for you about this. I'll let you get into the meat and potatoes of it, Dan. But without Pro Rel in Liga MX, is there as much drama? Should we care as much?
You know, it's a great question. I mean, I think that everyone's trying to capture the magic of Welcome to Wrexham. You know, and this Necaxa series is same style as far as the art cards that go on your streaming devices. It's like Welcome to Wrexham, but in Mexico with Eva Longoria. Eva Longoria, if you might remember her, was big in Desperate Housewives. If you remember that show from back in the day, that's how she kind of got to her fame. I believe she's also from San Antonio, if I remember correctly. I think living in South Texas, I heard that a few times. But both Reynolds and McElhaney, who are part of that Welcome to Wrexham franchise, are also investors in Club Necaxa, along with Eva Longoria, who is a key executive producer and an on-screen presence in the Necaxa series. I have seen clips that involve Reynolds and McElhaney as well. Not all great reviews. Jack Seal of The Guardian described it as Eva Longoria's attempt at recreating Welcome to Wrexham is just painful. If you read his review, it's both aggressive and also dismissive, which is a nice balance to strike. But I guess I'd love to know, Josh, have we reached market saturations when it comes to these series that focus on soccer clubs? Is there any juice left for Necaxa to squeeze?
There might be, and there's two sides of this coin. So, like I said, I used to dip in back in the day in some of these. We actually had an interview with the I think it was podcasters from Sunderland in the down season from soccer in our country. But you know, Till I Die, Sunderland Till I Die. There's a Leeds United documentary, Birmingham City with Tom Brady, which is the anti Welcome to Wrexham series. Apparently, that's how it's billing itself. Very aggressive and incredibly annoying is what I'm hearing. Crystal Palace had one. All or Nothing had several different versions. There was even a 3-episode Newcastle one that was just horrible. And then apparently Snoop Dogg, who's a minority investor in Swansea, he may be picking up the mic one more time and participating. There are so many. And so, Dan, I ask you the question. Yes, there are so many. Is this market saturation? I think we're very close. And so my question for you is, like, who is this for? Who are these for, Dan? Is this just for the people that already know soccer, or are these introductory pieces to hook new fans into these teams or into the sport?
Well, Welcome to Wrexham certainly took the approach of new fans, right? Like the sort of on-screen cards telling you about offside rules or, you know, what a corner kick was. Those are things that are clearly not for the average fan. Even a novice fan would be aware of those things. So it's definitely not for us. And I don't mean that to say that we can't enjoy it. It only means that we're not the target audience. I can watch an episode of Bluey and enjoy it. I'm still not the target audience for that show.
Are you sure?
I'm pretty sure. Okay. That's my opinion. That's my opinion. Some people disagree. I follow some of those people on TikTok. So I'll say it doesn't mean you can't have fun with this. It doesn't mean we have to hate this. It just means it might not be for us. I was going to say, by the way, that podcast was Wise Men Say was the name of that podcast.
Yes.
Those guys were a hoot. I enjoyed that very much.
Sunderland just got promoted to the Premier League. We might want to touch base and see how they're doing now.
I'm sure they're having
a good time.
A good time. I would also say the question about this is, how good is this for the fans of these clubs? And I wonder if that circles back to topic 1 with Detroit City. And honestly, topic 2, there's that too with Vermont Green. So anyway, who knows? I'm not sure I'm going to be watching it. I am halfway through the second season of Welcome to Wrexham. So,
you know, I'm glad that you started watching it. I'm proud of you. I know that sometimes I think the hype around things can derail your interest. If I take Ted Lasso, which could be a whole nother Protagonist show episode dedicated to Ted Lasso.
No.
There's so much hype around it. I'll tell you what, I watched the whole series. I was very reluctant to get into it. I was 2 years late to get, and I cried and I laughed and I cried and I laughed in multiple episodes. It's incredibly entertaining, but again, it's not necessarily for the soccer fan. It's just drama that's based in a soccer universe. And if that's not for you, Dan, that's just fine.
Fair enough. Viewing recommendations for this week. I'm looking at Wednesday. Apparently, I'll be honest, I've unplugged from the Open Cup for the most part because it's just MLS at this point. But the last U.S. Open Cup quarterfinal will be taking place on Wednesday between Philadelphia and Red Bull New York. That's interesting. I don't know that I'll watch it, but if you are looking for some soccer, I think that's an interesting match to pay attention to. I tend to like what Philly does when it comes to building out young talent. So they are a little bit more interesting to me than the mega corporation that is Red Bull and all the things that they do in soccer that I don't like.
Yeah, fair. Dan, I'm going to get stuck into some USL Championship. We've got Sacramento Republic. They're hosting Oakland Roots in a good old NorCal hoo-ha. Sac are one of the hottest teams in the league right now. They shot up to second and have not lost a game in all competitions since June. Despite a change of the helm, Oakland can't break free from the bottom of the table. They currently sit one place above the worst spot in the West. So they will be desperate for some points. I think this will be a real fun game.
There you go, Joshua Duder. Excellent. If you're looking forward to some soccer, that's two matches that you might consider watching. And if you're waiting, it's now time for Off Topic. And I'm going to kick this one off because why not? We talked about Detroit City at the beginning of this episode, and I'm going to close it out with that. Detroit City is unhappy. And I say Detroit City, NGS, the fans of the club, are unhappy about the Trevor James and Tiffany Ebert James exit from the club. Sean Spence, a writer that Words with Shapes, very familiar with NGS. How could the statement firing a literal club legend have less evidence of compassion and shared history than a similar post for a player cut in April? Evidence is thin on the ground that anyone in the room gave even half a shit what if customers would think about it. Yeah. So I am curious what this might mean long-term, because I did have questions about that firing or mutual parting of ways. And I'm curious about how that might impact a club that is really reliant on its supporters to get them there. Joshua Duder, you ready to go off topic?
I am. Let's go.
Do it.
Tim Weah is transferred to Olympique Marseille in the struggling Ligue 1. He himself is struggling a little at Juventus, so I hope this move really works out for him. As part of the announcement, he made the cover of Onze Mondial, a French football magazine, where he emulated the cover which his father was on when he moved to the very same club. This leads me to plug our magazine, Dan Vaughn, the Protagonist Soccer Fanzine, which has gone on pre-sale this week. Issue 1 will focus on soccer in New York with original written pieces full of original art. No AI was used in the making of this zine.
And it's on sale at protagonistsoccer.com. $8 and just $1 postage. That's less than $10 for
help us out.
Yeah, absolutely. This first issue focuses on New York City. You got some great writers.
There's a little Buffalo. There's a little piece about there's a little player in Buffalo.
So let's call it New York then.
New York.
Fair.
But there's great art, original artwork, original written pieces. And we have plans for issue number 2, which the setting will be, drum roll, the Southwest. Soccer songs of the Southwest, Dan Vaughn, covering Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona. I just had another writer reach out to me today and say, hey, I'd like to contribute to that. So it's going to be even bigger than the New York issue.
Love it. I love the Southwest. I love when Joshua Duder gets his head into a project, gets stuck in, and starts pushing. Even if Dan Vaughn is reluctant at first, Joshua Duder get it over the line. If you want to support what we do, check us out on patreon.com/protagonistsoccer. We have a loyal support group that has stuck with us through the many changes that we've gone through, and they make so much of this possible. A good portion of that first run is going to come out of that money, and thank you to your support. If you want to support what Protagonist Soccer does, please consider subscribing to that Patreon. every penny is spent creating soccer content. None of it goes in the pocket, unfortunately. Yeah, and protagonistsoccer.com, all kinds of content around the soccer that you love, that we love, and that we're following. See you there, and we'll see you next week. Have a good one. We're out.